The whole Fauci thing, like any criticism of Fauci, it's like anti-science.
Fauci's a freaking demon, if you ask me.
If you read RFK's book, if the real Anthony Fauci, if that's correct, if the facts are in there, that's true, it's all referenced, you could find the sources, and on top of it, he's never been sued for that book, which doesn't make any sense. If he just made a bunch of lies up, he would get sued.
Yes.
So the guy's a monster.
I think so.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah,
I think, like, just looking at the lies that he told, the way he tried to define gain-of-function research to Rand Paul.
But I think maybe a lot of people out there don't realize Fauci funded the bioweapons research that was going on in Wuhan. And he bank shot it off, like he can't send the money directly to China, so he just bank shot it off EcoHealth.
Right.
This like fake nonprofit in the US, and they sent it to Wuhan.
When people are vaccinated, they can feel safe that they are not going to get infected. When people are vaccinated, they can feel safe that they are not going to get infected. When people are vaccinated, they can feel safe that they are not going to get infected.
Now we know that the vaccines work well enough that the virus stops with every vaccinated person. Now we know that the vaccines work well enough that the virus stops with every vaccinated person.
Vaccinated people do not carry the virus, don't get sick, and that it's not just in the clinical trials, but it's also in real-world data. Vaccinated people do not carry the virus, don't get sick, and that it's not just in the clinical trials, but it's also in real-world data.
The 2 doses of the vaccine offer very limited protection, if any. The 3 doses with a booster, they offer reasonable protection against hospitalization and deaths. The 2 doses of the vaccine offer very limited protection, if any. The 3 doses with a booster.
Always got to get the weird stuff on the videos. That's a street sign. If you don't want to know where I'm at Sunny Hill West, deep in the forest here. Hopefully I won't run into a bear. I don't have bear spray. I just wanted to get a hike in, and I was going to make a hiking video. Look at that. Isn't that crazy? I mean, look where we are on this road. And I just came down that. I've been hiking, I don't know, about an hour up in here. Watching the world burn, watching the world burn. December 24th, 2024. Christmas Eve. This is my way to spend Christmas. I knew I had to get out and get a hike in. Tomorrow I'll be getting fattened up and happy, but tonight I'm just gonna make this video and relax and watch it. Got a new series on Prime that I've been watching. Hope you enjoyed that video of Fauci. I wanted to. Today we're going to make the COVID video that I've been promising you, the pandemic video. And, I wanted to go back. I was like, how much effort do I want to put into this video? Because I was going to go back and show you clips from videos I did back in 2000 where I would make fun of Fauci every single video. I hated that little bastard, for killing 1 million people. And hopefully, Biden's probably going to pardon him, but like I said in a previous video, I'm not sure that pardon's legal. Biden has been judged incompetent. He can't even stand trial for the crimes that he's committed because they said he's too far gone. So anyway, I don't know about that. But let's get a couple of videos up front, get some news out of the way first. This is, because the thing that's got me worried, and they were people talking about it, and they said that the same people that have been briefing Biden on the Ukraine war are now briefing Trump. And that's why Trump is getting nothing but bad information, about the casualty numbers. It's really, Kellogg will come out and say something like, the Russians have lost 10 men for every 1 Ukrainian, when it's just completely the opposite. So, but everybody's, who knows anything about the Ukraine war knows that that's just It's either bad information or a bold-faced lie. I'm not sure which. I don't know if you've been following along. The Russians continue to advance. They're killing thousands of Ukrainians every week. I can't believe that war is still going on. Blows my mind. But let's watch Colonel McGregor right now.
The other thing is that if we think we are going to dictate to the Russians anything, we're very much mistaken. We're not. That's not how this is going to work. The other thing is, for any agreement to be reached, as a minimum, the states that border Russia and Ukraine will have to be part of that agreement. Obviously, that's not just Poland. That's Slovakia, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, and probably Romania or Moldova, and Hungary to some extent. In other words, we simply show up and say we want a ceasefire, and this is the way we see things in the future. It's not going to go anywhere with Moscow. And I think we need to understand that. And recounting these false narratives, oh, the Russians are weak, the Russians have no choice, the Russians can't do this or that, they've taken all these horrendous casualties, all nonsense. It's not going to get you anywhere. I mean, you can preach that nonsense in the West to your heart's content if it makes you feel good. But the reality on the battlefield is very different. And that's what will ultimately decide the outcome. I think that's what President Orban in Hungary has tried to make clear. And I think there are some others. I don't know about the gentleman in Slovakia. He may or may not have joined in on that. But the bottom line is, I think most people know this is a situation similar to Napoleon Bonaparte and the Pope. Somebody said to Bonaparte about his intentions to annex something or to move into somewhere, either it was northern Italy or east of the Rhine. And somebody said, well, the Pope will never approve of this. And Bonaparte looked at the man and said, how many battalions has the Pope got? And I think at this point, it's put up or shut up. You know, either we are going to do something more than we say we will do, or we should sit down and have a no preconditions discussion and not turn this into a circus designed for propaganda at home. We do that too much.
All right, so that was the video from Colonel McGregor. And then this is a guy named Peter. I'll put his name up. Well, we'll show you the clip. And he was talking about the fact that, you know, we've sent a mandate to Congress. And if they're going to sit there, the rhinos, you know, the Democrats are the Borg. They all vote the same ways. Whatever Nancy or the Speaker of the House, what's his name, Raffoler, that crazy guy, whatever he tells them to do, all the Democrats will line up and vote. Whereas you've got rhinos in there that are going to try to overturn Tulsi Gabbard and Peter Hegseth and RFK Jr., you know. But this is his take on that. And we'll primary those suckers out. And like I said, Trump can appoint people for a certain period of time, regardless of how the vote goes in the Senate. But let's watch that video.
A new poll says Americans now overwhelmingly support Donald Trump's economic agenda, even if they don't like him. This matters as the Uniparty Congress gears up to fight Donald Trump because it means they're not fighting Trump, they are fighting their own voters. The numbers come from a new CNBC All-America poll of 1,000 Americans that found that 41% of Americans still oppose Trump, with 54% now supporting him. But what's interesting is when they ask about specific policies, support for Trump's agenda goes through the roof. So on his signature policy of immigration, 73% of Americans now want active duty troops deployed at the southern border to stop illegals, including 49% of Democrats. Just 24% oppose it. As for the economy, the same 73% of Americans want government spending cut, just 22% disagree, which by sheer coincidence is roughly the number of Americans who work for government. This matters as DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency, goes to war with the drunk spenders in Congress who allegedly serve those 73% of Americans who want it cut. Now, Americans want regulations cut by 2-to-1. They want business taxes cut by 2-to-1. They want more drilling for oil on federal land, again, by 2-to-1. 78% of Americans want income tax cuts. Now, sadly, they did not poll what percent of Americans want to abolish the IRS, which may be more than 78%. What's striking, of course, is that every single one of these overwhelmingly popular policies is opposed by roughly half of Congress. The case of cutting spending, more than half. meaning it really is shaping up to the people versus the Congress. Now, this is weird considering Congress, in theory, serves the people and only the people. But of course, big government buys a lot of friends who write checks to Congress things. So if it boils down to the people versus the donors, the special interests, whether it's wars and low-wage donors importing an army of migrant wage slaves, or left-wing activists who literally get their paycheck and fund their riots from taxpayer pockets. So how did we get a federal government where donors outbid voters? In short, mainstream media put a fist on the scale, gaslighting voters into a federal government where no donor is left behind. But one of the starkest lessons from the 2024 election is the fading power of that legacy media. Now, there are still millions of especially older voters who don't realize media is lying to them, but the spell is breaking fast. When 3/4 of voters say they want the entire Trump agenda after 8 years of nonstop media demonizing Trump, the end is nigh for the uniparty media. So what's next? Brought to you by Unchained.com. The American people are rapidly coming to the conclusion that whether or not they like Donald Trump, they very much want what he's promising. Smaller government, less taxes and regulations, cheap energy, and of course control over illegal migrants. At this point, the key is for those of us outside the legacy media to do everything we can to remind Congress who they work for, the American people. And as the American people start to see the results, the higher wages, lower inflation, safer streets, and cheaper mortgages, that consensus becomes overwhelming, and eventually Congress steps aside. As been said, politics is the art of finding a parade and getting in front of it. The people have spoken. Congress needs to get in line or get primaried to oblivion. Okay, we'll be watching. See you next time.
Okay, so there you go. We got that out of the way. And then, so we're going to get into talking about the pandemic. And man, I tell you, I could come back here and hike, I would say, for a couple of weeks. Here, let me show you. See this? There's all kinds of side trails here that go off into the wilderness in different directions. Let's get around here. Look right there. You know, you see the double sign. Now that crest is up high. You wouldn't want to do that in the summertime because you will get ticks on your legs. But for the most part, at this time of the year, you know, Christmas Eve here. By the way, Merry Christmas. I should have told you that. Sorry, I got into the video before I could say anything. Rather than waste any more tape here, let's just get into the COVID. I mean, by the way, Simon Goddard, by the way, he had 1 million followers. I don't know if you knew, he was one of the people that spoke out against the jab, and they ruined him. The legacy media just tarred and feathered him, and he lost his job, and he lost everything, and ended up going down to Brazil. But I think he would appreciate this statement. I'm unvaxxed and still alive. Unvaxxed and still alive. Unvaxxed and still alive. Even after breaking my damn neck. Oh yeah, I'm unvaxxed and still alive. Let's get into the COVID video right now.
Yet another move to hamstring the MAGA agenda. Joe Biden's Department of Health and Human Services just extended the liability shield for COVID vaccine makers through the end of, we'll let you guess, 2029, the year that Trump will leave office. What are they shielding manufacturers from if these vaccines are so safe?
Plus, HHS's vaccine injury compensation program still doesn't cover injuries from the COVID vaccine. However, a different, little-known government program can, but it's being slow-walked. Of the more than 13,000 claims sent into the program alleging injury or death from the COVID vaccine or another COVID treatment, fewer than 3,500 have decisions.
And of those decisions, 18 claims have been compensated. 3,373 have been denied. Joining us now, a member of the House Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Pandemic and a former emergency room doctor, Congressman from Georgia, Rich McCormick. A doctor and Congressman, great to see you. So if these COVID vaccines will continue until 2029, will continue to fall under this program, which you do not get reimbursement if you're one of the few that HHS decides in favor of, you get no pain and suffering. What's Biden and co. up to with this decision?
Well, it's not just that. If you look at the way they designed this, you have no repercussions. You can't sue these companies who have come up with these vaccinations that may or may not be harmful. But this is why we make decisions with our doctors and suffer the consequences. But we've held cigarette companies accountable. You just did a report on holding oil companies responsible for global warming, that they can be sued for that. And then you're going to say you can't hold people who actually have real manifestations of physical harm from vaccination for young, healthy people a lot of times that should have no business of getting a vaccination when they have immunity already, and you're not going to hold them accountable. This is ridiculous double standards, and it shows you who they're favoring and who they're playing politics with. And quite frankly, we just did a hearing in which 40% of this year's FEMA budget was diverted to, guess what? COVID paybacks. Still this year, the pandemic's been over for a couple of years. And I'm an ER doc. I served my last shift about December 28th, 2 years ago. And you know that this pandemic's over, but yet we're still spending 40% of FEMA during a year where we had shortfalls in the budget for hurricanes on something that's been over for a couple of years. Shame on us. We need to hold these people accountable.
Well, all this money gets shifted around in the background, and almost nobody knows about it, which is why you need something like DOGE to take a huge, massive floodlight and shine it in here. And then you've got all these alphabet soup agencies that administer these different things. Here's my question. Can you roll these late-stage decisions back? Can Trump come into office and say, 2029, forget about it, we're going to rescind that, we're going to repeal it? Or can Congress do that? Who can act on this?
I think we're going to have to come to agreements on it. I think now that we have the trifecta, we have so much work to do. Matter of fact, the biggest thing that's going to hamstring us is how much we have to actually accomplish in this first 100 days. How are we going to pass a CR? Are we going to pass a skinny? We're going to do 2 reconciliation bills. The last time we actually got it done right was about 30 years ago. I believe it was 1997. We have a tremendous amount of work to do. We have a very narrow margin in the House, more narrow than the Senate. That should mean something to a lot of people. There's a lot of fighting to be done, so don't think it's over yet. But if we can get it right, we might just save America.
Yeah, and don't force people to ever take a jab in their arm ever again. Because in New York City, the companies and individuals, if they wanted to go into the workplace, were forced to get the COVID vaccine. Never again. Never again. I will go jobless before I do that again. Dr. Rich McCormick, thank you so much.
All right, if a bear sneaks up behind me, let me know. It's getting to get dark. I wish I could have found my headlamp. I don't like being out here without a headlamp, but it's a wide open road, and well, it's going to be dark as hell. It's cloudy here. Let's just get going into the COVID video here. 10 shocking stories the media buried this week. This is the Valiant Fox, and we're just going to read the first one here. Now, I'm going to mispronounce a few of these words, but I'll put the text up. So if you're a medical person and you're going to laugh at me and say, man, this guy can't do the medical lingo here, but drug regulators busted hiding COVID jab risks. Internal emails reveal that the TGA, Australia's FDA, knew that. By the way, if you recall, Australia had all of those, they actually put people in concentration camps for not getting the jab. So they forced just about their whole population to get the jab. Now, Biden tried to do that here, but luckily we have a Supreme Court that overturned that, obviously. But many people still obeyed this to keep their jobs, unfortunately. That's the totalitarian Democrats. That's what they do. All right, let's keep going here. Knew that. Yes, foreign DNA from the COVID shots really could integrate into the human genome, despite repeatedly assuring the public that it was impossible. Rebecca Barnett dropped the bombshell report exposing what TGA staff were saying behind closed doors. And it's nothing like the rosy picture they painted in public. In one email, the TGA staffer debunked Dr. Paul Offit's claim that DNA from the COVID shots could integrate into the human genome without an enzyme called integrase, Grase. The staffer wrote, foreign DNA can integrate into chromosomal DNA in the absence of an integrase of mammalian cells. This comes from the DNA damage repair literature, where breaks in the DNA are repaired through processes called non-heterogeneous end joining and heterogeneous recombination. This directly contradicted the TGA's official narrative, which repeatedly denied that such genomic integration was even possible. Man, I just read this. I'm going to have to watch this video about 3 times to be able to try to understand what the hell I'm reading here. All right, let's keep going. I would be uncomfortable with that statement about plasmid DNA entering the human genome, as I am aware of studies which have tested this. So behind closed doors, they had serious unanswered questions about DNA contamination and the potential for genomic integration. But to the public, they said, everything's fine. Everything's fine. Remember every other advertisement, get the jab, get the jab, get the jab, get the jab, get the jab. The jab is free. Go to Walmart, go to CVS, go to Walgreens. You can get the jab, get the jab, get the jab, jab, jab. That's what the Democrats, man, good God. Can you imagine how much money the government spent advertising for? I mean, every other commercial was get the jab. The pharmaceutical companies made a fortune, didn't they? Oh my God, it's just insane. I might be reading the same thing again, but let's just keep going. This isn't how things are supposed to work. Regulators like the TGA are meant to protect people, not withhold critical information. This is yet another shocking example of how the so-called experts, remember Fauci, that little bastard, good God, if that guy doesn't go to jail, I mean, we have no criminal justice system whatsoever. How can you kill 1 million people and not go to jail, man? All right, adding to the alarm, new research from Yale has found spike protein lingering in the blood years after individuals received their last COVID shot, making concerns about integration with human DNA more plausible. Senator Rennick from Australia joins the show to discuss these damning revelations. Let's watch that video right now.
It is widely known now that health authorities, politicians, and the legacy media lied about the safety and efficacy of the COVID injections. They purposely hid adverse event data, purposely lied about and hid the fact that these injections were killing people, and furthermore attacked anyone who dared to try to warn people. At this point, anyone still pushing that false narrative about these injections should be investigated and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. But what of those who took the shots, are still alive, and are around those who lost so much in the process of refusing to be part of the grossest medical experiment in history? What happens to their bodies? Well, we have been covering the facts regarding DNA contamination and shedding on this broadcast for some time. Essentially, anyone who managed to survive these lethal injections thus far is potentially facing changes to their DNA that are irreversible and, even worse, spreading to the rest of the population. So we know that health authorities lied and covered up the dangers, deaths, etc. associated with the shots. Did they also cover up DNA integration? According to emails obtained under Freedom of Information from within the Therapeutic Goods Administration in Australia, they did. From Rebecca Barnett, bombshell, Australian drug regulator knows DNA fragments in mRNA vaccines can enter nucleus and integrate into genome, internal emails show. Internal emails from the TGA reveal that the regulator withheld knowledge of DNA contamination risks relating to the mod RNA vaccines from the public, presenting a picture of certainty on safety where there is none. Released under Freedom of Information, the cache of emails shows that high-level TGA staff knew elements of the mod RNA vaccines can enter the cell nucleus and integrate into the genome, despite the agency's official line that such events are not possible. However, TGA personnel appear more preoccupied with allaying fears in the public than with investigating the potential risks. The highlights here are that TGA staff acknowledge that DNA integration into the genome is possible. The TGA knows that the SV40 enhancer or promoter in the Pfizer vaccine can drag DNA into the nucleus of the cells. Pfizer did not disclose the SV40 sequence to the regulator, and TGA staff are apparently not aware of any testing for mod RNA or DNA integration into the human genome. Now, this is an incredibly detailed Substack. We encourage everyone to read it in full. Rebecca Barnett does a fantastic job, but here's a little bit of the background on how we got to this point. On the 18th of October, the TGA published a statement addressing misinformation about excessive DNA in the mRNA vaccines. The statement came after the release of a report by Canadian virologist Dr. David Spiker alleging the presence of synthetic plasmid DNA fragments in Australian vials of mod RNA COVID vaccines at levels of up to 145 times the regulatory limit. This, of course, also comes to attention after the vote by the Council of the mining town of Port Hedland calling for an immediate suspension of the injections. And we had Councillor McRae on this broadcast. You would remember that story. Now, the TGA's statement was littered with false and misleading claim, which Rebecca Barnett has written a Substack about and addressed. But emails released under FOI reveal that the TGA knowingly withheld information on DNA contamination risks from the public. Now, important to note, involved in these communications was staff from the TGA's Scientific Evaluation Branch, Toxicology and Biological Science sections, Pharmacovigilance Branch, Communications Team, and even TGA boss Professor Tony Lawler, showing that personnel at the highest levels are aware of the potential risks associated with synthetic plasmid DNA in the mod RNA shots. With thanks to Dr. Melissa McCann, whose request for all TGA correspondence related to the production of the webpage and associated social media posts regarding allegations of DNA contamination in mod RNA vaccines has further exposed the regulators' duplicity on this matter. Now, again, we encourage everyone to read the article in full, including all of the email exchanges, but I wanted to highlight this specifically. Initially, one TGA staffer offers the argument touted by US vaccine expert Dr. Paul Offit and serially quoted by fact-checkers including Scientific American, which is that foreign DNA in the mod RNA vaccines cannot integrate with human DNA without the presence of an enzyme called integrase. As integrase is not present in mammalian cells, the argument goes, there is no integration risk. However, TGA colleagues quickly debunk this claim and it is deleted from the draft memo. Quote, foreign DNA can integrate into chromosomal DNA in the absence of an integrase in mammalian cells. This comes from the DNA damage repair literature, where breaks in DNA are repaired through processes called non-homologous end joining or homologous recombination. Exogenous DNA can potentially be incorporated using these processes. And you can see that email there. From the biological science section, quote, although unlikely, there are alternative mechanisms for DNA integration. And from a senior toxicologist, quote, we agree with comments raised by BSS that the original dot point on the role of integrases should be deleted. There are papers implying that other enzymes or mechanisms are involved in integrating SARS-CoV-2 sequences into the DNA of human cells. In the end, the assertion that DNA integration is not possible is dropped from the memo, replaced with a more nebulous statement about lack of evidence. Quote, there has been no evidence of mRNA vaccines or biological medicines resulting in integration of residual DNA into human DNA genome or causing cancer. However, one staffer admits that he or she does not know of any science to support this statement. Quote, with regard to adding the comment about plasmid DNA entering the human genome, I would be uncomfortable with that as I am unaware of studies which have tested this, and so personally, I have no experience in the matter. Organisations such as the TGA have become so fat and bloated and extraordinarily compartmentalised that it seems to result in a failure of any single individual being able to discuss topics such as these in their entirety. Therefore, no specific individual, department or person is ever held accountable. We see this quite often with any of these so-called experts or representatives fronting up to some sort of hearing, being investigated, and constantly giving answers along the lines of, I'm sorry, I'm not aware of that, or I'll have to take that question on notice, amongst many other sidestepping responses, which always result in some sort of plausible deniability. That's certainly been the case every time Senator Gerard Rennick and people like him have posed some of these difficult questions to the TGA, who seemingly perform a song and dance every time a direct answer is possible. Well, these emails certainly paint a different picture. where one could only assume they almost exclusively intently alter information and communications to protect Big Pharma and all of the health authorities, politicians and media who continue to lie to the public about the injections. Senator Gerard Rennick joins us to discuss now. Senator Gerard Rennick, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you being here.
How are you, Maria? Good to see you.
Very well, thank you. Well, you were at the top of my mind when I read about this TGA bombshell, because I know that you've been going harder at the TGA and all of their, I can call them lies, since the beginning pretty much. And you have continuously been given the runaround by this organization when you have asked extremely direct questions. And so I guess the key takeaways, according to Rebecca Barnett here, really are that the TGA staff have acknowledged that DNA integration into the genome is possible. The TGA knows that the SV40 enhancer promoter in the Pfizer vaccine can drag DNA into the nucleus of cells. Pfizer did not disclose the SV40 sequence to the regulator, and TGA staff are not aware of any testing for mod RNA or DNA integration into the human genome. Really interested to hear your thoughts on all of this.
Well, it's just more evidence of the fact that the TGA weren't aware of what they were doing when they decided to approve the mRNA vaccines. Long story short, it's further evidence that Pfizer, I don't think, have been completely honest with the TGA. The TGA have relied too heavily on Pfizer and their testing. And, it's not just DNA contamination. It's, issues around the safety of the lipids, the duration that the spike protein stays in the body. So it's another nail in the coffin when we're talking about, just the poor quality assurance when it comes to rolling out a medical product that was basically put into the arms of 20 million people, many of whom were coerced to take it in order to keep their jobs. And it's just not acceptable that the people are being forced by their government to take a vaccine that hasn't been properly tested.
Absolutely. And of particular interest to me was, and I've already highlighted this, but Tuesday, 15th of October, a TGA staffer says foreign DNA can integrate into chromosomal DNA in the absence of an integrant in mammalian cells. This comes from the DNA damage/repair literature, where breaks in DNA are repaired through processes called, and you helped me with this word before, non-homologous end joining or homologous recombination. And so the conclusion here is exogenous DNA can potentially be incorporated using these processes. But this was the 15th of October, Senator Rennick, and then the TGA issues official statements and an interview with SBS News where they're saying, we're combating mis and disinformation, and specifically addressing the fact that no, DNA integration is purely misinformation. Well, one of your staffers says, no, hang on, that can happen. So there's trouble at the TGA, it seems.
Well, there isn't enough. Well, there's not enough trouble at the TGA in my view. There needs to be a lot more trouble in the form of, let's start with sackings. But, some of these people probably need greater accountability than that. I don't want to get too hot-headed in the interview, but I think we all know what we mean. And what's worse is, so not only have they not properly tested the vaccine and conducted thorough quality assurance checks, the response on the 18th is typical of the TGA and how they double down on their poor quality assurance in the first place. And that is unacceptable as well, because we've seen it in other examples whereby, the length of the spike protein, I've now come across an autopsy report where the pathologist has said person has died 7 days after the vaccine because they took the vaccine, and the TGA never reported that to the Australian public. They had an obligation, in my view, if an autopsy is conducted, the pathologist says the vaccine killed the person. Also made some recommendations about putting warning labels on the vaccine and the tests that people with certain heart conditions should undertake before they even get the vaccine. The TGA never followed up on any of that. And then they've covered up the death. And then their excuse to me was, well, why did you do that? Oh, we were following the World Health Organization guidelines. Well, the World Health Organization guidelines just say it's very difficult to ascribe a death to a vaccine. Well, that is a big general motherhood statement, and I don't think it is too difficult. I mean, it should be the other way around, that every death X number of days after taking a vaccine should be considered as a result of the vaccine until proven otherwise. That's the precautionary principle. And in normal medical tests, and as I said to you earlier, I have owned biotech stocks in the past, it's always been the benefit of the doubt lies with, you've got to have a pure risk-on process here, whereby if anything happens after the person has taken that drug, you've got to prove that it wasn't the drug that caused it. It's not the other way around, that no, it was, you've got to prove that the drug caused it. No, you've got to prove that the drug didn't cause it,
right.
If that makes any sense.
Yes,
so,
of course.
And that's the thing. We had the evidence here in Australia at least. We were quite a good data set for looking at the safety of the vaccine, because we were locked down for 8 months after the vaccine rollout began. So we don't have the conflation with COVID deaths between May 21 and December 21. And that's really, really important. And we had a jump of 10,000 deaths in the 8 months, which was a jump of just under 10% compared to the prior year. And what's significant about that was that we also had 3 months of lockdowns in New South Wales throughout that period, which would have reduced the death rate. And no population increase either. So we've got both. We understand the biochemistry. We've got things like the DNA contamination. We've got the statistical data showing an increase in deaths. We've got evidence of cover-up by the TGA across a range of issues, both statistical, autopsy, and now with this DNA example. So the evidence has to be that the TGA has not done their job properly, and they have caused and that poor performance by the TGA in terms of quality assurance testing has resulted in the deaths and injuries of thousands of Australian people.
Yeah, as a bare minimum, we can put it down to incompetence. And I think that some of that is evidenced in the sense that, you've got one staffer there saying, well, I don't really know, I'm not really aware of any of this. I mean, that person does not belong in that role, first and foremost. If you don't know about studies when there are countless studies published about the DNA integration, countless studies published about the dangers of these injections, autopsy findings, myocarditis risks, we're talking about shortening of people's lives in many instances. Myocarditis as calling that a minor symptom? I don't think so. So if a person from the general public can find that information and a TGA staff is just not aware, they don't belong in that role. But then on top of that, you have a staffer saying, no, actually DNA integration is possible. The TGA chooses to omit that, which means that there is a cover up there, and publishes something completely opposite of what one of their own staff has said. This is extremely sinister, Senator Rennick, and I know you've been, really holding this organization accountable for a very long time, but it seems they keep sending you, a senator, around in circles. How do we really pin them down?
Well, the only way to pin them down really is at the ballot box, because I can assure you the two major parties in Australia, both the Coalition and the Labor Party, aren't interested in pinning them down, because they both supported the rollout of the vaccine. Many of the politicians within those parties said on numerous occasions these vaccines were safe and effective, even though they had absolutely no idea of what they were talking about, hence why they're covering up their involvement in it. And that's, unfortunately, that's the difference between Australia and the United States. You've at least got, hopefully, with the new Trump administration coming in, there is a view that they need to interrogate the safety of these vaccines and really start to scrutinise what took place. And let's hope some of these people like Anthony Fauci are held to account. I know certain other actors in the States are trying to stop that from happening, but let's hope that does happen. But we need a similar administration here in Australia who is willing to do that. Unfortunately, neither of the major parties are willing to do that, so that leaves it up to the minor parties. But we unfortunately don't have the numbers to form government. What we may be able to get after the next election, as a result of if we campaign well, is to get enough senators in the Senate to at least have the balance of power. But the only problem with that is that because both major parties agree, we can only ever hold the balance of power when the major parties disagree. When they do agree, they'll just vote against us en masse. And that's what's been happening in the last 3 years. So the incompetence of the TGA is also an extension or as a result of the failure of the politicians to hold these bureaucrats to account. Those politicians should be working for the people. They're not. They're actually actively engaged in covering up for the TGA and for Big Pharma. And so as a result, many Australians, including myself, are incredibly frustrated with, the sellout by Australian politicians in protecting both the bureaucrats and big corporations.
Well, Australia is in a very, very dangerous place right now. I mean, we've just had the social media age ban pass in the country, the absolute insane display of how that all went down at the end of the year, ramming through, I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, was it 46 bills that they went to ram through without any debate, really. So Australians are watching along in horror, Senator Rennick, of essentially a completely failed democracy. What effects do you think that the new US administration may have on the country come next year's election?
Well, it's going to set an example. And I mean, of course, time will tell with how successful the Trump administration is. And I wish them all the best. I hope they can, clean out the drain the swamp, as they say. I hope that can happen. And we need to do the same here in Australia, to use an Australian colloquial term. Let's drain the billabong over here. The same needs to happen here. Unfortunately, what's regardless of your personal views on Donald Trump, what's incredible about Donald Trump is that he's been able to overcome the establishment and rise up. I mean, that's what I love about the states and the people, the American people, is that they've always had the guts to stand up to their own government, and they really get the idea that it's the people that confers power on the government. Unfortunately, here in Australia, we were set up as a convict colony controlled by a government, and many of Australians are used to government control, and they don't fight back as hard as what they do in the States. I mean, I love my country, but I do get disappointed how my fellow Australians, or some of my fellow Australians, don't push back against the government hard enough. And that's the same within the two major parties. They both are part of the establishment. We don't really have anyone other than Alex Antic and Matt Canavan on the coalition side that's prepared to push back against the establishment. We do need a third way in this country, which, and I'll admit, that's up to myself. I'm one of the people that need to form. We need to look at a third way whereby we can get a good centre-right party up that can start challenging the two major parties. But it's very difficult in Australia because the media will not talk about minor parties unless, they do a pile-on. And the minor parties are sometimes their own worst enemy because they'll get too emotional and irrational and not try and sort of stay level-headed and fact-based. So, and you've got to do that more often, and we need to come back to those economic issues, because to me the biggest sort of horror show in Australia right now is our economy. We've got record debt, household debt. We've had the RBA lift interest rates 14 times. Australians are doing it tough. They've been many of them having to sell their homes. They're either then having to move back in with their parents, or they go homeless, or they start living out of a caravan. And this will be the way to cut through the two major parties, because most people do think first and foremost how they're going to make ends meet. I mean, and that's just life. They're aware that government are doing other issues, but we really need to sort out our economy, because nothing controls people more than debt. And if you go back to the vaccine mandates, many people didn't want to take those vaccines, but were forced to keep their jobs. Now, had they not had the level of debt they had, or not had no debt and maybe a bit of money in the bank, they might have been able to go, well, we'll see you later, champ. We'll sit this out. And then we'll, once the vaccine mandates are lifted, we'll go and get another job.
Yep.
Or look for a job that doesn't require vaccine mandates.
People who were more financially free were able to make that decision, Senator Rennick. That's the point you're making.
Yeah, but here's the thing, because there was only a small number, if we didn't have such high levels of household debt, that number would have been much higher. And if we had a much higher number of people saying we're not going to put up with this crap, suddenly we could have pushed back. And that's one of the problems we're up against. There's a handful of politicians in the Senate that will push back, but we're greatly outnumbered. And there were a handful of great people that had the courage to stand up, and I speak to many of them who had the courage to stand up and push back against the mandates and say we're not going to take the vaccine. But unfortunately, it was below 10% of the population, even though my view was probably about 40% of the population didn't want the vaccine. And that's after the initial I think they might have got to about 60% of people would have got the vaccine. This was early on around May 21. It was, the polls were showing about 60% of the people would get the vaccine and 40% wouldn't. They then did those mandates to get it up to over 90%, or so we're told. And I think the reason why they did that was that so it's hard to tell. Like if you had a larger sample of people who are unvaccinated, it would have become much easier to distinguish between the health of the unvaccinated and the health of the vaccinated as well.
Yes, that's a very good point. Look, I recognise that Australia is in a lot of trouble. A lot of countries in the West are in a lot of trouble. Will there be a shift next year, depending on the success of the Trump administration or not? I don't know. It's yet to be seen. But coming from Australia, I can say with certainty that a lot of people are absolutely fed up with the way that things are going, and they plan to be a lot more involved in next year's election. And the TGA is a huge part of that. Senator Rennick, we want to thank you for your time and for all of your effort in holding this organisation accountable. You can find Senator Rennick and follow his work at Senator Rennick on X. Thank you again for your time today.
Thanks very much, Maria. Have a great day, or evening, I should say.
Okay, so that was that video. And you know what? We're just going to do a little more news because I don't want to stop again. So we're going to get off the COVID thing and just do a couple of things from here from the Valiant Fox, and then I'll make another video because I got a bunch more material on the COVID virus, and I don't think you can take too much all at once. And so let's just read a couple of his. Joe Biden targets Pelosi and coup leaders in a stunning act of revenge. With Nancy Pelosi recovering from a broken hip, Biden is floating the idea of banning members of Congress from trading stocks while in office. If you didn't know, Nancy Pelosi does a hell of a lot of insider trading. She's made, boy, something just snorted. Thought I heard. Well, maybe we'll just do this one more. He stated, I think we should be challenging the law that we have to abide by the at the federal level, that nobody in Congress should be able to make money in the stock market while they're in Congress. Well, couldn't agree more with that. However, Fox News host Jesse Waters isn't buying Biden's timing, saying that this isn't about fighting corruption, but getting retribution, he reported. Biden didn't want to ban Congress from insider trading during his entire 50-year career in D.C., but a month before he leaves, he gives Nancy a little gift. It isn't about stopping corruption, it's getting retribution. So if Nancy wants to get rich in the House, she might have to do it the old-fashioned way, peddling influence like the big guy. And this is the video from Jesse Waters.
He's stuck in the hospital recovering from a broken hip. Biden is floating the idea of banning members of Congress from trading stocks while in office. He stated, I think we should be changing the law that we have to abide by at the federal level, that nobody in the Congress should be able to make money in the stock market while they're in the Congress. Let's take a listen.
Biden doesn't care as much about being president. He cares more about getting revenge against the coup leaders. Joe just threw a hand grenade at Nancy Pelosi while she's stuck in a hospital bed in Germany.
I don't know how you look your constituents in the eye and know because the job they gave you, it gave you an inside track to make more money. I think we should be changing the law that we abide by at the federal level, that nobody in the Congress should be able to make money in the stock market while they're in the Congress.
Biden didn't want to ban Congress from insider trading during his entire 50-year career in D.C. But a month before he leaves, he gives Nancy a little gift. This isn't about stopping corruption. It's about getting retribution. We asked the White House if the president has called Nancy to check in on her after she broke her hip in Belgium. We haven't heard back. So if Nancy wants to get rich in the House, she might have to do it the old-fashioned way, peddling influence like the big guy.
Maybe Biden really did mean to publicly display his MAGA hat after all.
Okay, we'll do one more here. Valiant Fox, number 8. Michael Cohen turns heads on CNN. Trump is right about media lies. In a jaw-dropping moment on CNN, Michael Cohen, Trump's former attorney turned critic, admitted what Trump supporters have been saying for years. The legacy media is riddled with sloppy, agenda-driven journalism. Wow. If you didn't know that, I mean, I shouldn't even be reading this. I mean, I think everybody, well, Democrats don't know this. I mean, because, like I said, they're just meat puppets that follow along the mainstream media. But this conversation was a reaction to recent news that President-elect Donald Trump filed a defamation lawsuit against ABC News, resulting in a $15 million settlement. The lawsuit stemmed from anchor George Stephanopoulos' inaccurate on-air assertion that Trump had been found civilly liable for raping writer E. Jean Carroll. Cohen, who famously flipped on Trump, didn't hold back as he derailed a handful of 100 lies media spread about him during the time he was Trump's ally. Watch, and let's watch that video.
Michael Cohen turns heads on CNN. Trump is right about media lies. In a jaw-dropping moment on CNN, Michael Cohen, Trump's former attorney turned critic, admitted what Trump supporters have been saying for years. The legacy media is riddled with sloppy, agenda-driven journalism. This conversation was a reaction to the recent news that President-elect Donald Trump filed a defamation lawsuit against ABC News, resulting in a $15 million settlement. The lawsuit stemmed from anchor George Stephanopoulos' inaccurate on-air assertion that Trump had been found civilly liable for raping writer E. Jean Carroll. Cohen, who famously flipped on Trump, didn't hold back as he detailed a handful of the 100 lies the media spread about him during his time as a Trump ally. Take a listen.
The poll was wrong. Many of the polls are wrong. They've been wrong for many cycles. But it's not like this is the only thing that has been said in the news from either side that is not true.
I hate to say it, but Scott is actually right about this one. I hate to say it because Scott and I very rarely agree on anything. He's right. He's right about this in the fact that sloppy journalism, sloppy polling, and what they did. I was the recipient of more than 100 lies. And I understand what Trump is doing in terms of changing the way defamation cases are brought in this country. You may remember the allegations. I was in Prague, never been to Prague. I was in Czechoslovakia. I paid $10 million to Kompromat. I have a house next to Putin in Sochi. None of this is true. On top of that, there was another one that came out as an example where I allegedly was paid $400,000 by Poroshenko to create a meeting between him and Donald Trump during the presidency. That is also not true.
So do you think it should be easier? You believe it should be easier?
No, I think that media has to do their job. They have to actually, they need to get the facts right.
Wait a second.
Wait. And that's always wrong.
All right, that's it. I got to get going. It's going to be dark out here in the wilderness, and this is much more dangerous because I know this is a huge area, and there's going to be a lot of bear in here. Peace out, stay free, and Merry Christmas. All right, so on the way back from breathing a little hard, I'm trying to hurry along. It's definitely going to be dark. There's some stagnant water, probably. That's another thing. Gators could come up in here at night, and I wouldn't be able to see them. Anyway, I'm just crying on your shoulder because I really wanted to hike, but I don't know, I just get into it and I go too far. But anyway, I was listening to Sean Hannity, the best Sean Hannity on the radio. Obviously, he's not working on Christmas Eve. But Tara Rodas, never heard that name, but evidently she's an HHS whistleblower that blew the lid off of the child trafficking that Mayorkas has been doing for, well, the Biden administration, but Mayorkas heads it all up. For the Biden administration, man. And boy, the stories she's telling. One 8-year-old had a venereal disease, and she sent that kid to the hospital, and a 9-year-old had been raped so many times that the damage, that kid had to go to the hospital. But the numbers were even more staggering than what I knew. This is what Democrats are, man. They're pedophiles. A lot of them are. I'm sure Mayorkas is. Otherwise, why would he traffic children intentionally? Okay, and by the way, they spent, God dang it, I had the amount. I want to say $8 billion trafficking, just the kids. That's not the rest of the human trafficking that the Democrats did. You got any Democrat friends? Ask them why they want to rape kids, man. Please do, and then give me some feedback on that. But anyway, the number she gave was 325,000. And of course, the Department of Homeland Security is stonewalling because there are people that have been trying to find these kids because, you know, the records there, but they won't turn them over. And the few records that they have gotten, when they went to the houses where the kids were supposed to be dropped off, one was a strip club, another was an apartment building that had, 50 kids living in it, like in one room. And then there was a couple of the addresses were just, you know, like almost post office boxes. There was nothing there, you know, abandoned house or something like that. So God knows, I guess Tom Homerman, this is going to be, other than criminals, his top priority is going to be to find these 325,000 kids. Now, the other thing that she brought out, Democrats, you know, I imagine there's some rich Democrats that benefited from the organ harvesting, because she said that there's a lot of organ harvesting of these young kids, and they don't know where the body parts are going once the organs are harvested. And I can tell you where it's going. It's going to a bunch of pedophile Democrats, man. That's who they are. Why do you think I don't want to be around a Democrat? Anybody that is this evil, that would put up with this amount of evil, vote for this type of evil, is not your friend, man. Is not your friend. And then to continue to vote for it again and again when it's all over the news. I mean, you'd have to really literally stick your head in a freaking swimming pool and not listen to anything in the world going on around you. Anyway, I just wanted to get that out as I'm going back. By the way, it's I kind of like it here. You know, because of my broken neck, I can't feel my legs, so it's cold. But I'm able to, on the soft ground, I'm actually able to kind of jog, because the brain, the neurons don't make it to the legs very well. So I can walk, but I can't jog. But I'm actually kind of getting a little jogging. Just my Christmas. Merry Christmas, man. I'm actually doing a little bit of jogging on the way back here. Of course, I'm in a hurry. All right. So I thought I'd get this on the video. If you didn't think I got deep into the forest, how far do you think that is? Just saying. If you don't think there's predators back here, look at what's left of that bird. Something ate it. That's where we're coming from. Well, let me get moving again. I just wanted to make fun of them. Just listening to the radio, they're calling that partly cloudy. I swear, you got to be a weatherman in Florida. You can make a ton of money and be wrong about everything. That is not partly cloudy. That is cloudy.